A recent tragedy in South Africa has drawn attention to the country's housing crisis. 70 people died in the incident last month in Johannesburg when a fire gutted what's known as a hijacked building. Many of the country's poor live in such rundown properties, which are taken over and controlled by armed gangs. DW correspondent Diane Hawker gained rare access to some of these hijacked buildings in Johannesburg and sent us this report.
And then just be careful, né? Here, this is the shack. That's the shack, Emma. All right.
This used to be a hospital. Now it's squatted. City officials are inspecting it as part of a drive to crack down on illegal landlords. Dozens of people, including families, live here, unable to find cheap accommodation elsewhere in the inner city. It's dark, damp, and it stinks. It's clear that refuse has not been collected for a long time. The building is home to many children, and just 2 months ago, 2 died in a fire. But those who live here want to stay because it's so hard to find anything else in the inner city.
We are totally unhappy about what the government is doing. The Department of Housing should find a solution to this problem. We want them to reconnect our electricity, and we are not leaving this place.
They pay as much as half of their monthly income for cramped and unsafe, dirty spaces. Many of the hijacked buildings in the city of Johannesburg are municipal-owned properties. In some instances, like with the Casamia building behind me, the buildings have been taken over by criminal syndicates who have intimidated municipal security and gained access forcefully. Police don't usually enter this area. It's an unofficial no-go zone they say criminals use as a hideout. Officials say this audit could help return the hijacked and occupied buildings to their legal owners.
We had tenants in this building that was paying rent to the city. We then were in the process of refurbishing the building, and we had relocated the current tenants to another place. And in that process, COVID then happened and the building was then hijacked, and since then it's been occupied.
Family number 1, family number 2.
It's very basic here, but for undocumented foreign migrants and desperate South Africans, it's important to be in the inner city where they might find casual work. The Socio-Economic Rights Institute studies living conditions in the inner city centre and says the government needs a clear plan on how to improve the situation.
We have policies that are there that can assist in the situation that we find ourselves in. But I think when you come to the local level, this is where you also find that there is a bit of a gap in terms of that we haven't in the inner city had a functional citywide response to the issue of housing in the inner city.
If these people were to be evicted, South African law says the municipality must provide somewhere else for them to live. Yet officials admit the city simply does not have enough space for all those desperately in need of safe, affordable housing in South Africa's City of Gold.
Let's get more from our correspondent, Diane Hawker, who joins us now from Johannesburg, South Africa. Hello, Diane. Nice to see you. Now, considering the dangers, how did you gain access to the hijacked buildings?
Well, it certainly wasn't an area that we could enter ourselves without some kind of a police escort. We actually accompanied a group of municipal officials who went along with municipal police into these buildings as they were doing inspections and trying to do the audit. Unfortunately, the area that these buildings is in is quite well known for being a bit of a crime hotbed, and it would have been quite dangerous if we had simply tried to go in there unassisted or without knowing some of the residents or community groups in that area.
And then you had access to the building. How did it feel like being in there?
I must say it was quite shocking. I mean, I've been a resident of Johannesburg for over a decade now, and I've heard about the hijacked buildings and the occupied buildings and the terrible conditions, but it's quite different when you see it firsthand, particularly knowing that a lot of people are living there with their children and families. The conditions, you know, are really appalling. There's certain sensory aspects that don't carry across in the package, such as the smell in those buildings, simply because, you know, refuse hasn't been removed for a long time. There doesn't seem to be any real process for the removal of rubbish. So it's just piling up in courtyards within the buildings or outside on the streets. And there often isn't running water. So one can imagine, you know, sewage and things like that are also not being collected. So really the smell was something that I think stuck with me and the camera person for hours after we entered that building. And I think also the feeling that I got was a bit of a sense of despair that people were living in these kinds of conditions and will continue to live in these kinds of conditions unless something drastic is done to resolve it.
I mean, the hijacked and abandoned building problem seems to be a part of a bigger socio-economic issue. Tell us more about that.
Definitely. I think over the years, you know, South Africa has become within this region seen as an area where people can get prosperity. And in South Africa, that location of prosperity has for a long time been Johannesburg. You know, Johannesburg has a local nickname, Egoli, which means, you know, the place of gold. And you know, for decades, it's been a place where people literally would come to seek gold in the mines. But the mining industry has decreased over time. On the flip side, that influx of people into Johannesburg has not. And that is people migrating within South Africa to look for greener pastures, as well as those coming from outside of South Africa looking for some kind of opportunities. So particularly in the areas where you have those hijacked and abandoned buildings, you'll find a real melting pot of people from rural areas in South Africa, as well as those coming from outside who don't have enough resources to get better accommodation and end up staying in these buildings under very poor conditions.
DW correspondent Diane Hawker in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you.